see. History of Patient. Patient is a 12-year-old white male who was an unrestrained passenger in a camper when... Oh. Sorry. Interesting little details. It's just brushing up on some history for this next story of young Daniel Vane's life. One of the most impactful events in young Mr. Vane's life. In fact, we really cannot pick out to date another event which has had more traumatic impact on Mr. Vane's life next to being born. And because this story is so grand, as it were, it's likely will have to be divided into, I'd say, 2 parts. If we have to go through 3, then we're doing something wrong. And in case you did not pick up on what I was reading, it does involve a motor vehicle accident. August 23rd, 1987. It was the end of summer vacation for young Mr. Vane and his brother and sister, who were, of course, with their parents. The whole clan had spent a weekend or so camping throughout the Redwood National Forest in Northern California. Family had gone camping quite often. So often, in fact, that they ended up purchasing a RV. And this is what they were traveling in throughout their trip. They were on their way home from this little camping trip. School would be starting in a week or so. It was the last hurrah of that summer. And Mr. Vane had only turned 12 years old, no more than a month prior to this event. Mr. Vane's dad, who typically did most of the driving throughout any family trips, had, of course, become fatigued. So, to give him a break, Mr. Vane's mother took the steering wheel, something that she actually did quite often whenever long trips were taken by the family. So she was quite accustomed to driving the large RV, even through windy mountain roads. It was getting into the evening Young Mr. Vane's brother and sister had fallen asleep already on either side of the rear bench of the RV. Mr. Vane had the center bench. And he fell asleep. It was quiet, no radio reception. We were up in the mountains. PCH, Pacific Coast Highway 1. One of the most treacherous highways. Oh, definitely in California. Mr. Vane, little Mr. Vane, woke up sometime during his sleep into a nearly dreamlike state, as he could hear his dad suddenly yelling in absolute shock and terror, yelling Mr. Vane's mom's name. And don't get any weird ideas. It wasn't that kind of screaming. It was a holy shit, what the hell are we doing? Oh my god, this is not gonna turn out good type of screaming. Mr. Vane had some strange sensation of floating for a moment. He could see towards the windshield and out through the front of the RV. And he could see that the skylines, just everything outside just started to turn and shake. And the whole RV shook. And Mr. Vane floated up. And then everything went black. When young Mr. Vane awoke, finally, he woke to loud noises, hard blowing wind, cold, strange people standing above him, and absolutely baffled by what was going on. The wind and the noise was from a rescue helicopter which had been called in, given the circumstances of what had just happened. We'll get there. Mr. Vane was loaded onto the helicopter and flown to Santa Rosa Community Hospital, a trauma center, where he was evaluated in most emergency type fashion. X-rays, CT scans, this, that, and the other thing. Turned out Mr. Vane had a broken back, lacerated head, slightly cracked skull, amongst other problems, bruises, scratches, a whole lot of other very uncomfortable things. The whole thing to Mr. Vane really was a blur, to say the least. Everything just seeming to happen all at once. The malevolent. Finally, after some time had passed, maybe some time didn't pass, and Mr. Vane finally saw his dad. His dad had finally arrived at the hospital. And he told Mr. Vane that his mother was very upset and very, very apologetic, and asked young Mr. Vane in his broken, confused, clueless state if he could reassure his mom when he saw her that everything would be all right. No problem. Eventually, yes, did see his mother. She showed up, and yes, she was in tears, apologizing, blaming herself. Mr. Vane gave the best smile he could get up. Don't worry about it, Mom. Everything will be fine. The hospital at Santa Rosa was not equipped, so to speak, to handle such a traumatic emergency on a pediatric patient, child. So, Mr. Vane was again loaded onto another helicopter and transferred to Oakland Children's Hospital, where he was evaluated some more, given more treatments, this, that, and the other thing, checked for his everything, his vitals, his reflex responses, because, that's always a major concern when a break happens along the spinal column. And just like when Mr. Vane had this little incident and was finally at Oakland Children's Hospital, that's when he was finally able to catch his breath, so to speak, and find out what happened. And we'll stop right there, because the malevolent, for one, doesn't want us to tell this story, because it'll probably not help the malevolence endeavors. So, we will adjourn and return in a few moments. Hopefully, we'll be rid, at least for now, malevolent interference.